Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're plunging right into the dark, gelatinous depths of a literal cosmic cold case, the sentient ocean of Solaris. We're going to unpack one of the absolute most fascinating works of science fiction ever created, and look at the frankly legendary clash of visions it sparked. So, this eerie question really haunts the core of our exploration today. It sets up this profound philosophical battle between two incredible master storytellers, Polish author Stanisław Lem and Soviet director Andrei Tarkovsky. They were debating an unsolvable extraterrestrial mystery, but really, it's a debate about the hard limits of the human mind itself. All right, let's jump into Section 1, the sentient ocean of Solaris. Picture this. You've got a distant planet completely swallowed by a black, protoplasmic ocean that literally defies all known laws of physics. When a psychologist named Chris Kelvin arrives at this isolated space station hovering above the world, he expects to find a rigorous, humming scientific outpost. But instead, he finds a traumatized crew, a dead colleague, and an ocean that is basically idling its time away in extravagant theoretical cogitation. It's this monstrous entity, clearly endowed with reason, that is entirely and completely ignoring humanity's desperate attempts to say hello. For over a century, human scientists have been throwing everything they have at this thing. They've hurled their radiation, their math, their grand theories into the depths. And the result? A massive, honestly degenerated library of academic literature called solaristics. The planet has utterly defeated human science. We've hit these insurmountable barriers, and we're reduced to just categorizing the unknown without actually understanding a single drop of it. And to really grasp just how stuck these researchers are, just look at the desperate vocabulary they invented to categorize the ocean's shifting formations. They use terms like tree mountains, fungoids, right? These are earthbound geomorphological terms. It completely exposes our inability to think outside of our own anthropomorphic language. I mean, we are quite literally trying to describe an alien brain using the vocabulary of a terrestrial forest. It's wild. Moving on to Section 2, Lem's unknowable alien abyss. This brings us to the guy who actually dreamt up this whole nightmare, Stanisław Lem. His thesis, published in his 1961 novel, is cold and intensely epistemological. He basically points out that just because we see something that looks like rational activity, that doesn't mean we get to know what it means. There is simply no reason, no guarantee at all, that life elsewhere in the universe should be comprehensible to us. The universe doesn't owe us an explanation. So, the big takeaway here is that for Lem, Solaris is the ultimate brick wall. It is an unknowable abyss. The ocean brutally exposes the limits of science and the tragedy of our imperfect machinery for gaining knowledge. It's a mirror, yeah, but an impervious one, a surface that just reflects our own scientific hubris right back at us while keeping its true alien depths entirely out of reach. But, well, the second we switch gears to Andrei Tarkovsky's 1972 movie adaptation of the novel, the philosophical vibe violently shifts. Tarkovsky takes that whole concept of the mirror, wrenches it away from the abyss of the alien, and points it directly into the human soul.
Which brings us to Section 3, Tarkovsky's Mirror of Humanity.
Tarkovsky essentially guts the hard science from Lem's story. He turns this space station into a completely claustrophobic, psychological purgatory. And the mechanism for this is what the crew calls the guests. You see, the ocean starts probing the scientists' minds, extracting their deepest, most traumatic memories to create these actual flesh and blood avatars. For Kelvin, it's his deceased wife, Hari. And Tarkovsky treats this not as some fascinating alien reflex to study under a microscope, but as a grueling, intimate moral test of human conscience. And the deeper psychological truth here is pretty wild. The characters in Tarkovsky's version, they don't actually want a fake reality. What they desperately want is to see the world they imagine to be real reflected back at them. The appearance of the guests forces them to confront their own humanity. It's this incredibly symbolic exchange, an eerie consumption of the subject, where Kelvin's total surrender to Solaris is what allows him to eternally return to his own memories. All right, Section 4, Science versus Human Morality. So, as you can probably guess, the friction between these two creative titans sparked a legendary ideological clash over what science fiction is even for. Lem dedicated half his novel to cold analytics. To him, space is an objective reality that ultimately proves our rationality is flawed. But Tarkovsky, he reduced the science to almost zero. He turned our home planet into a coveted paradise and portrayed space as this hostile void where literally the only things that matter are love, spirituality, and nostalgia. And let me tell you, Stanisław Lem was famously furious about this. He absolutely hated it. He felt the director had completely stripped away his profound epistemological puzzle and replaced it with a story centered entirely on Kelvin's personal guilt and emotional suffering. In Lem's eyes, Tarkovsky hadn't made a movie about first contact at all. He had made a Russian tragedy.
Which leads us to our final part, Section 5, the ultimate cosmic irony. Here's the thing. Within this bitter, bitter feud between author and filmmaker, there's actually a hauntingly beautiful synthesis. The absolute cosmic irony is that Tarkovsky's complete inability to look at an alien ocean without turning it into a mirror for human morality, well, it exactly proves Lem's thesis. Lem said we are trapped by our own anthropocentrism, right? That we can only ever see ourselves. And by looking at the most alien thing imaginable and turning it into a movie about human guilt, Tarkovsky inadvertently proved Lem 100% right. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to let that eerie thought linger. Both Lem and Tarkovsky, in their own completely different ways, showed us that we don't really want other worlds. We just want mirrors. But think about it. If our minds are this confined, if we can't even dream up a fictional story about an alien without making it all about us, perhaps out there in the vast, cold dark, the only monster we will ever find is the one we brought with us. Thanks for learning with me today, and keep questioning the unknown.